she said, I don't eat margarine because I trust cows more than scientists. And I thought that's apropos to exactly what we're facing today, or dealing with today, which is technological, advanced science, and the pursuit of capitalism, which I'm not anti-capitalist. This is not an anti-capitalist statement. It's just a statement of fact that very few investments are geared towards biology, and unfortunately, biology is what makes food taste great and what makes the world a healthier world to live in. And I think we will wake up and realize that in the same way that we woke up and realized that margarine is not the future of butter.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture. You just heard from chef and author Dan Barber of the Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture, quoting last week's guest, nutritionist Joan Gussow, who always saw real butter as the nutritious food that we know it to be. Dan's point here is that with the modern surge of admiration for tech, sometimes biology gets left out of the conversation, even in farming, where it plays an undeniably important role. Dave got a chance to sit down with Dan last summer in between meals at Stone Barns, and you'll hear for yourself what a busy place that is.
So I just had a really interesting interview with Joan Gussow, and I asked her, we were talking about the organic Twinkie debate and whether you could have an organic Twinkie. And she said no, she didn't think so. And it was because it's a question not that you couldn't have organic ingredients, but when you put those ingredients together to make a super processed food, that is not the point of organic. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's an age-old thing. You're right. She started that. She was the first to pose that question, wasn't she? It's sad that is there such a thing as an organic Twinkie, by the way?
No.
There is not.
No.
But it was a
hypothetical
intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are organic gummy bears now.
There are.
So
it's not, it's all these things that are hypotheticals that you would think no crazy person would ever buy such a thing is now reality. In the same way they would think, why would you highly process peas to imitate a burger and say you're saving the world? That would be impossible. And yet here we are. That's the best thing that Joan ever said was to me she said a lot of great things. The best thing she said, and I think it's apropos to what's happening today. You and I had a conversation about the billions of dollars going into replacing the cow from the face of the earth and replacing farmers, and money that's flowing into hydroponics and stacked up greenhouses and the rest. She in I think it was the 70s, said when everyone was turning to margarine, including my family, so it was very personal to me, butter was out. You could not eat butter. Margarine was a technological advance that made butter seem anachronistic and unhealthful, and margarine was everything that the scientists could put together to make you healthy and not miss butter, and et cetera. And she said, I don't eat margarine because I trust cows more than scientists. And I thought that's apropos to exactly what we're facing today, or dealing with today, which is technological, advanced science, and the pursuit of capitalism, which I'm not anti-capitalist. This is not an anti-capitalist statement. It's just a statement of fact that very few investments are geared towards biology, and unfortunately, biology is what makes food taste great and what makes the world a healthier world to live in. And I think we will wake up and realize that in the same way that we woke up and realized that margarine is not the future of butter.
So somehow, assuming that we're not going to abandon all capitalism as an economic system, we have to find some way to temper that blind drive for profit with some sort of survival instinct.
Or lean into the profit motive, but look at it through market share. And I think market share comes through flavor. I mean, we've had this conversation before, but I double down on flavor, and you can't get real flavor. Real, true deliciousness only comes from great soil. I've never had an example where that's not true. That's very inspiring. Unfortunately, we tend to live in a world, or in a country, not a world, a country where there's a lot of questions around flavor, deliciousness, hedonism, and hedonistic tendencies, and good for the world or good for you. We have this Puritan understanding of that you have to sort of suffer to be healthy or be good for the planet. That's the environmental movement, isn't it? It's giving up stuff to have a kind of salvation, and it's religious in that sense. It's you pay a penance and you get some sort of salvation. But with the food movement, the kind we're talking about, that's not that at all. It's hedonism. That's what it is. I feel very good about doubling down on it, because there's a future there with those kinds of pleasures attached to it.
Well, all right. Let me throw again Mark Schatzker's question that came up in the book club, because I thought it was a great question, which is that people think of hedonism as reaching for the Doritos because they like the Doritos.
Yeah.
And a craving has been created. And he would say that our taste buds have been tricked, that we've been duped into, manipulated into doing things that in fact nature wouldn't do to us. It would say, this tastes good, you should eat it.
Yeah.
And
that was a great question.
Yeah.
And it was why I feel like chefs should be leading this conversation.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm wearing a white coat today.
Yeah, thank you.
Because we don't get tricked. We curate this stuff all day long on our tongues, and so it's not to say that there aren't chefs who are interested in processed food and fall for those tricks, but few and far between. We're talking about a group of people who are paid to be deciders in chiefs of what is truly delicious. I think be listening to that is interesting, and also a lot more pleasurable than doctors. So I believe in that advocacy quite a bit, because I believe it leads to, if you have the kind of advocacy that I'm talking about, and on that kind of trained palate, the downstream effects are enormous. You really can't trick chefs into the kind of pitfalls that unfortunately the American diet has fallen.
So chefs have been the provocateurs, the leaders in farm to fork, farm to table. And
I think they have been, yeah.
Yeah, that has
right.
created a big shift.
Yeah.
That trickles down beyond just the white cloth restaurant, right?
Well, yes, and no. Yes, for sure. I you say trickle down. I know you don't mean that in the Republican sense. You mean it in the Democratic sense, and I think that's true. On the other hand, the farm to table movement, if you pinpoint it to, well, you could pinpoint it to 40 years ago. I think most accurately became really a conscious way to eat, and became an everyday consciousness for Americans in the last 10 to 15 years. But what's happened in the last 15 years? Big food's only gotten bigger, and food's only gotten more expensive, and there's more people who are food insecure, and there's more people who are eating unhealthy than ever before. So that's not a movement. For a movement that gains the kind of consciousness that the farm-to-table movement has gained, and for the number of farmers markets that have exploded over the last 15 years, you would think that that big food would be under siege, but in fact the opposite is true. And what I think that points to is that farm to table has some work to do. It has to go deeper. It has to complicate the picture. We really need to think of, and that's why I go back to organic, and that's why I was so drawn to the Real Organic Project and your work, because it is about thinking. It is about the true term of organic. It's the holistic aspect of organic. The organism. One is an organism. You can't pick apart arms and legs. And what modern organic agriculture, modern farm-to-table thinking allows you to do is do that. Grocery shop. You go to the farmer's market with a much better choice than going to a big food chain. But you pick this, you pick your tomato there, and you pick your zucchini. On your way home, you may buy some loaf of bread from the store, et cetera. And that's the kind of, I think, that's the kind of freedom that has ultimately been destructive. It ends up being a very elitist movement because, of course, that zucchini and tomato that you bought at the farmer's market is very expensive, very expensive. And from a soil perspective, if you dial all the way back to that, very expensive. I mean, look, vegetables are hard on soil. They take a lot of nutrition. You talked about that yesterday, a lot of fertility. So what is that really a movement that's democratizing the field or democratizing our diet? No, I think that's for the 1%er. And that's why I think it hasn't moved beyond where we started this conversation 20 years ago. So my sense of it is to go back to the real term of organic, which is what is the entirety of the farm growing? What's the community growing, actually? It's even wider than that. Who's growing it? So that gets into the social justice issues of how it's being grown. And how's it getting to you? Just as important as a pesticide or a fertilizer. And unfortunately, as you have said many times, the conversation has been distilled to, is there a fertilizer or pesticide applied? And if not, then thumbs up. And in fact, as we know, it's much more complicated than that. So I'm all for complicating the picture and looking at a field not just for the tomato and the zucchini, but the brassicas and the cover crops, and even those farms that rotate grains and animals through that same pasture, so that you are getting a suite of diversity, biodiversity, but also a suite of nutrition and a suite of flavors that I think the best way to dictate that is cuisine. Is a pattern of eating. And that's why I look to cultures and cuisines from around the world over 10,000 years that have developed a pattern of eating that didn't come out of whole cloth. The American diet's out of whole cloth. The American diet's the eating the high and the hog. It's a very new, actually it's a very soil-rich diet. I mean, it's colonial, of course, and it's based on tons of fertility. I mean, how the hell do you create American diet that comes out of scarcity? That's ridiculous, doesn't it? It comes out of gross overabundance. So it's the high on the hog, literally. So that we were able to do that isn't genius or technological innovation or some kind of prowess on the American. It's just luck. I mean, we just here and we had a landscape that we forced the agriculture on, and for a couple hundred years been very successful. But if truly sustainable, as you know better than anyone, that's a long-term project, and we are looking very bad for the long term. So how do we circle out of this? One place to look is cultures that have dealt with this issue for thousands of years. Often with a lot less horsepower. I mean, for all of history, a lot less horsepower than we've had, right? And the ones who have done it successfully, and I would say a cuisine that has lasted for thousands of years is a success, are the patterns of eating that are responsive to landscape. It is those dictates of rotation that I often give the Japanese example of a bowl of rice, as simple as that is. It does require barley and buckwheat as rotation crops, but what do the Japanese say? They don't point your finger and say, if you want to have your rice, you better eat your buckwheat. They create soba noodles, so you eat soba twice a day, and you can have your rice 5 times a week or 10 times a week, 14 times a week, to lunch and dinner every day. But you have to eat with a nod to the realities of the ecological carrying capacity And that's often rotation, and it's often diversity. And that's why cuisine is, but it's diversity of a particular kind. It's not the diversity that you get to pick, or a chef actually even gets to pick. It starts from the landscape. And it's one farm or a community of farms that is responsive to what the land needs to grow. And I keep saying responsive to the land needs to grow because it means that you're not adding an intervention. So you're adding the intervention, you break that covenant. You know, you think you can grow what you can grow because you're adding a fertilizer, you're adding a pesticide, and you're banding over the problem, as you know. If you're not doing that, then you're relying on the kind of complexity you were talking about yesterday, which is difficult. But over the course of time, there's so many playbooks that are fascinating, I think, rich and fascinating, and particular to place, which I think brings on a whole nother trajectory. It's like, that's what's so fascinating, and that's why cuisines are so distinct, because they're of place. So it's that negotiation that a peasant farmer was making to eke out what the land could produce, and figuring out what crop needed to come before and what needed to go afterwards. And then there was the cultural, the human culture of how do we prepare it. And that's just so interesting. How many variations came out of the landscape, how many variations came out of the stove, out of the kitchen. That is a lesson that I don't think Americans have ever been forced to explore. We're this hodgepodge of different cultures. We were a very rich country where we weren't forced into that. So how the organic really works when you're forced into it, I think. It becomes much more exciting. When you have the possibilities of spraying a problem away, the organic solutions become a lot less attractive.
So what you're talking about, and this is really important, is not just looking at whether this product is organic, meaning was it sprayed with a pesticide or something. You're saying, what was the system that this was a part of?
And it's not too big an idea for the everyday person to understand. I always get said, well, how do people in the busy work day, how do they? Bullshit. People love to learn about food. People love stories. That's what culture is, right? So that's crazy to say there's no time to miss. That is what every French culture, Indian. I mean, look at the number of variations on lettuces there are in northern Italy. It's like every couple kilometers, there's a different type of lettuce for a different type of salad. You go south, there's a different risotto every 10 miles. It's like different rice based on soil structure, based on temperature change, based on culture, on how they prepare the risotto. And Italy fits inside of New York State. It's like America, geographically, the opportunities for distinct ecological functionings, that is different soil types and different weather patterns and different lengths of the year, is phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. So the idea that there's an American cuisine is absurd. Obviously, we should be looking at it on it's not just regional, it's micro-regions. And what is it that's distinct about the micro-region that nobody can get anywhere else? That's fascinating. That's where I think, that's why I think chefs are so interesting to lead this, because that is where the movement's gone, actually, for chefs. You go, look, when you and I went out to dinner 30 years ago, if you went to dinner in New York, and I'm talking about a bit more expensive meal, but not even, you could trickle it down, but if you went out for a meal in New York City, and then you flew to San Francisco, and you went to Dallas, and you went to Detroit, you kind of had an expectation of what the restaurant would be serving. I mean, there was a certain, especially in French, Italian, I mean, there was just certain things that were there, that were a part of what it meant to be a better dining destination. That is thrown on its head in just the last 10 years. In fact, if you go to New York and San Francisco and Dallas, and you go to restaurants that have predictable menus, that restaurant's going out of business. That's what's happening today, and this is true around the world. You go out to eat, you have an expectation to go somewhere that you are going to get something that you can't get anywhere else in the world, and that drives the menu towards a hyper-regional context. That's very exciting, and it ekes out a lot of history and a lot of niche ecological functioning that expresses itself in what you're eating. That's just exciting. That's the future of restaurants. And if you believe in your trickle-down theory, or our trickle-down theory, then that ends up spreading to others. And what ends up happening is people become very demanding of that for dinner. And I think that's the future of much better food. I don't think it's just in the purview of white tablecloth restaurants. I think that's going to spread.
So in order to get the agriculture that we believe is sane and that we believe will feed us and make us healthy, you're saying we need to change the culture.
The food culture.
The culture has to change, whether we change it or not. There has to be an evolution.
Totally.
Do you think?
You know, it reminds me of all the conferences I went to, Dave, organic conferences. You know, you've been to them all over the years, all the big ones. I never, ever, in one of them, years and years, I never, ever experienced anybody talking about food, restaurants, chefs. They talked about food in the sense of farming, but I'm talking about food in the sense of gastronomy. No gastronomy. Gastronomy was foreign. I've been to an equal amount of gastronomic conferences around the world over 30 years of my career. Never once was there discussion and in-depth look at agriculture and biological systems and organic systems. Never. It's as if those two worlds run on these like crazy parallel lines. It's nuts. It's nuts. That's why this place, to me, that we're sitting in, is so important, because it's actually the first time where those two things come together in a way that farmers and chefs are talking to each other. A farmer that isn't talking to a chef or people who care about food is not an informed farmer. And a chef today who's not talking to a farmer is not a chef. Period. So that's what we need more of. And I don't think that's going back to what you're giving up. That's not drudgery. That's real pleasure. I think that's a conversation that has legs.
Yeah. And a conversation we have to figure out how to tell so that people want to hear it. You know, I think you're right that culture, it's got to be about storytelling.
Yeah. What else is there?
Yeah.
We're in a post-truth world, Dave.
Yeah. You're a very good storyteller. People like to hear it. So,
coming in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, can you have him start with Mike? Yeah, and can you join it?
Yes.
I'm going to be 2 minutes. Like you tell him, I'll be right there.
I won't hold him.
No.
Good. Any final thoughts about Real Organic Project? You've been so generous about it. Anything you want to say?
Well, everything I'm saying, and I should say it more clearly, points to the Real Organic Project, because unless we have real organic, we don't have the kinds of, we don't have the power of deliciousness, which is where I always start. You just don't. And I beg you to find a hydroponic system or an organic system that's cutting corners, or a non-soil organic system, supposedly organic system, that produces the kind of deliciousness and yearning to have that experience again, because that's what we're talking about when it comes down to it. So it actually is that simple. It's to what extent would somebody want to go out of their way or pay a little bit more to have the experience, the pleasurable experience again. And that's it. That's it. You know, it'd be nice if we started the Real Organic Project. We thought for the future of the Real Organic Project, we started thinking, I just said it to you, I said, you know, we don't, when we're talking about agriculture, we don't talk enough about gastronomy. We talk about gastronomy, we don't talk enough. Well, what if the Real Organic Project brought that into play? You know, what if the Real Organic Project was not just the farmers that you mentioned, you brought in there's 1,100 farmers, 1,100 farmers you brought, amazing. In just a couple of, just 5 years, what if we brought in, 1,100 restaurants with the Real Organic Project? Why not? I mean, if you believe what I'm saying is true, and you believe the culture is the place, because at the end of the day, what I've learned, and it's a hard lesson, and I don't mean this to sound hard-hearted, I mean it to sound hard-headed, is that nobody cares. Nobody cares. We talked about, Hugh and his blueberries yesterday. Now, we care because we all tasted it. We freaked out on these blueberries, just freaked out, everybody. and everybody's behind broadcasting us. But until we taste it as blueberries, albeit we're trained on blueberries, right? We have a lot, during the summer, we eat a lot of blueberries. We know the varieties we like. We know the farmers we like. We know the soil where it comes from. We got it. But then we taste the blueberry on another higher level. It's just like, it just blows gaskets. And we all been talking. I can't stop thinking about the things till I get them in March. So, but what is the average person? Can you expect the average person to, without tasting something, to really care about the plight of organic or farmers? I don't know. I think you're fooling yourself, or we're fooling ourselves, because for so long I felt that way. That just because you believe that food is important and farming is important, that you're going to devote yourselves to supporting farmers. I mean, there's so many causes and there's so much noise. And that's why we're in a post-truth world. It's like, where are the facts? The facts, who knows? The stories, and part of the storytelling is the tasting. It has to be. It has to be. So I'm going to say this on podcast film now. I would say, let's join forces. Let's expand and complicate the picture of real organic into the cultural space and the gastronomic space, because it's gonna help the cause, not just complicate the cause. It's gonna help the cause, because it's gonna be about tasting the kinds of things that you had me taste. Thanks to you, I tasted the best blueberries of my life. I think there's a lot more out there we could do with the chef's advocacy, but I got to prove that to you. So let me work on Hugh here next March when he has his blueberries, and we'll see where we can go with it. But the work you're doing is amazing, and I'd love to support it. I'd love to see other chefs support it. And I tell you, I think other chefs will support it, not because they like you as much as I like you. I like you. I bet they would. But even if they don't know you, they support it because chefs are pit bulls for that flavor. I mean, it's very much transactional. It's like, a chef just wants to be a better chef. And that's why we're so driven by product. And when you understand the connection between product and soil and product and seed, you don't go back. You just don't go back. So I would suggest that we broaden the scope, and I would love to help with that.
I like it. I accept the offer. Thank you, Dan. Man. We will figure that out. All right. Dan Barber, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. Our movement is growing because you're subscribing and sharing these podcasts with your friends. Keep it up and leave us a rating and a review as well. You can find a video version of this interview on our newly designed website, realorganicproject.org, or on our YouTube channel. Join us next time when our guest will be Iriel Edwards, a certification inspector for the Real Organic Project based out of Louisiana. Iriel gave a powerful talk at our Churchtown Dairy Conference on the history of USDA discrimination and land access for Black farmers.